Munian downs talamu, stalm hina gruagach stu
Hi,
halin
I'm Courtney
down.
Williams with Outlander Behind the Scenes, extending my congratulations to Àdhamh Ó Broin for being recognized by Scottish Gaelic Awards 2016 and winning the International Award. Well deserved, my friend. Please enjoy these clips from our interview from May 2016. Can you just give a summary of what you're doing in case people don't know with your funds and with your sort of your life work, what that is with Gaelic?
Well, I suppose when people when I first heard people talking about a Gaelic revival or saw it written down, I took it totally literally. Once I got to fluency and I moved through every stage in the process, every time I did move to another stage, I got more committed to the revival because I realised how necessary it was, and if nobody acted, we were going to end up the chute.
So you are going about that by, I know that you're going to visit some of the older people in the villages and you're talking with them and gaining words that gone out of use and things like that. What else are you doing?
Sin ceart. Gosáach chans na leich an ar dá séket.
Tell him a Gaelic. I get me kinder ni, vi brunner Gaelic, vi mycket brunner om hit.
Oh, bí.
Vi är nere jag knäckte. Alla med tryckarna mi. De här med puttigen jag lagar ner kärtan.
Ja, wel heb hina ket mar a jansach mi sé Gaelic, ma mi bruin rum he.
Well, I mean, really what I'm trying to do is stimulate interest for intergenerational transmission to be re-established, for people to start spending time with their grands and granddads or their parents or their aunties or uncles, and not only that, their neighbours or people that they you know, whatever, go to church with or meet in the shop or bump into in the street or whatever, and oh, they're a Gaelic speaker, and I kind of am, and maybe I could tidy my Gaelic up by sitting with those older folks and learning about the way they see the world and about their even their ethical outlook as a part of this. It's all interwoven, you know, learning songs and poetry and traditions, and for it not to be like an animal that's stuffed and mounted in a museum. Do you know what I mean? Right. The way I see it is, it's like people saying that the revival is going to be accomplished just by putting kids through Gaelic medium schools is almost like saying, oh, the Java tiger. Oh, well, it's not endangered now. There's plenty of Java tigers in zoos.
Right. To you, it's a living, breathing thing that occupies your heritage and your land, and you're just trying to...
It's all interwoven, exactly. It's not just something that exists in a sort of sterile educational environment where, you know, kids are being educated. You know, yeah, that's great. And I mean, for instance, my kids go to the Gaelic school in Glasgow, and it's a great school. I sent my kids there because I wanted them to have that as part of the bigger picture, you know, of Gaelic being in, you know, and sort of the foundation for their cultural lives. So, like I say, I took the whole picture holistically, and I saw the language and culture as being a lifestyle, you know, not just like, you know, you put a kilt on at a wedding and then you take it back off and put it in the cupboard, you know, like an affectation. You know, I saw the whole thing as, well, you know, it's either worth everything or it's worth nothing. Gaelic's a wild being, and it needs to be let loose on the land again.
When did your journey with the Gaelic language start, and how did it start?
I mean, it started growing up in a house in Argyll in Tunabruich called Intoperdu, which is the Black Well. So I grew up in a house with a Gaelic name, which had been owned by an Islay family called the McKechnies, who were a really, really well-known scholarly family in the Gaelic world. We had Derek Thompson, who was one of the greatest Gaelic scholars of all time. His son had the flat downstairs from us, and I used to go and sit in his flat and chat with him when I was like 5 or 6, and always thought it was funny that he spelled his name Domhnall. You know, of course, it wasn't Domhnall at all. It was Donal, which is Gaelic for Donald, but I didn't know that at the time. And, you know, he would sing in Gaelic and what have you. And then there was a fella called Callum Ferguson, who's a very eminent kind of author and speaker from Lewis, and he was a family friend. So myself and my mum and would go and see him and his kids, and you know. So, and I remember him giving me my very first Gaelic lesson at the age of 7 on how to pronounce the place name that I came from. So it was all around all the time. And then just as I get into sort of my early teens, you know, my gran had started to, you know, she had started to become more Scottish in her old age, because I was brought up more or less nominally British. I mean, my parents parted company when I was 6, but they were both no interest in Scotland, no interest in music, no interest in culture, no interest in anything like that. You know, so I was sort of basically a walking blank slate. I suppose got the initial interest in actually learning the language directly from my grandmother, who then came out with this sort of revelation of all our people on the Caithness side, which is the very northeast of Scotland, all had the Gaelic. Oh, right, okay. And she only had 3 phrases that her father had passed on to her, and he was really irritated that his father never taught him. And all she could say was Matin va, good morning, Eicheva, good night, and Slancheva, you know, good health. So that was all she had. So I learned these 3 phrases from her, and she sort of said to me during, you know, the very last kind of couple of years of her life, she was sitting in a hospital bed, and she sort of, you know, said to me, you know, have you learned the Gaelic yet? You know, and I'm saying, no, I've not got into it yet. And she was like, well, what are you waiting about for? I'm too old. You know, and she was like 96 or something, you know. She's like, I can't do it. Get on it. And she sort of shook her fist at me and went, bring it back. But I started pottering away with a couple of books, but didn't really do much in the first year, and then started going to classes. So from there, it just grew. It was like literally like I got, you know, bitten by the Gaelic vampire, and then became one myself, you know. Just like, but I mean, you know, at first I just kind of like floated about from class to class, but eventually I had to feed, you know. So I obviously went after more Gaelic meat, you know. And you know, I suppose it just the more you eat, the more you crave. And it was, you know, like I quite often say to people, you know, yeah, I just started. I started smoking the Gaelic at weekends with friends, and before long, I was injecting it straight into the vein.
Your grandmother started you off in your living situation, and your family was part of that. But the passion, the way it was ignited in you, has something to do with you, though, right?
Well, I think it must do, but you know, being a sort of walking blank slate, I think I was probably always searching for where the heck I came from, and all the way through my life, I'd always felt this sort of connection to my surroundings, and I'd been fascinated with place names, and I would listen to Gaelic music as a matter of choice. That's all I listened to, Runrig and Capercaillie, and especially Capercaillie, and other acts that I can't really remember now. Clanads, you know, stuff that isn't exactly, you know, really necessarily fantastic, but it's all you can get a hold of at that age without a guide. You know, just stuff that's come popping into the charts now and again, but it's Gaelic. I was just like, that's for me. So while all my mates are all giving it and raving it up, you know, there's me sitting at home with the high diddle dee dee, you know. You know, there was always this connection between myself and my culture and my country, and I've always been a red hot patriot. I've always been, you know, for an independent Scotland, and neither of my parents believed in it at all. And I know other people like that who've got no reason to be, you know, patriotic, and yet they are. Do you know what I mean? So for me, it's about reconnecting with a vein that carries Scotland's soul along in it, And if you want to, you can bite right into it. I mean, you know, it's like tap into it. Just tap into it. And once you touch it, you actually touch that living vein, which essentially is Gaelic language and culture. It's a super highway back into the past, and you're just zipped right back into the past, and you necessarily reconnect, and you begin to feel very, very powerful, to be perfectly honest, but in a really good way. It is frankly pretty much pseudo-religious, you know. Gaelic language and culture has an energy that even in areas where the language has ceased to be spoken, if you sit quietly in that area composing bardach, which is poetry, or composing árainn, which are songs, or just singing or playing the pipes, or you just get completely connected right back into the energy that's there. And I believe the Gaelic energy that exists in Scotland, which surrounds us in the Highlands and in the Northern Lowlands, anywhere that Gaelic was spoken, still has that energy, and you can reconnect with that, and it will more or less show you how to live your life. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I'm living proof of it. It works for me, you know. It makes me feel totally and utterly at home, relaxed and fearless, you know. And I suppose that's what allowed me to take on the work with Outlander, which I know a lot of people said to me, I don't know how you cope with that pressure. That is insane, you know, having to take the language single-handedly, because it was just me, how to single-handedly take the language to Hollywood, you know, and sort of come out relatively unscathed. They're like, I don't know how you did it. I'll tell you how I did it, because the entire time that I was doing it, the Gaelic spirit of Scotland was pulsing through my every vein, you know. And if there was a big shoot and there was something really important that we were about to do, like maybe Graham had a big speech or Sam had a big section, I would be listening to pipe music on the way in the car to set in the morning, and literally, you know, concentrating on the road. But other than that, that was my only distraction from absolutely channeling the spirit of this nation into myself every time I had a big job to do. And that's how I get through it.
How did it come about that you even work on Outlander?
Oh, I mean, that story can be told very briefly, in fact, and I've told it quite often, obviously, because it's people are interested in this, you know, because how do you get a job as a Gaelic consultant on a Hollywood show? The story is literally, I saw an email come out from the production that went to Salmore Ostig, the Gaelic College in Skye, who pinged it out to everyone they knew to try and help out, you know, Outlander find the person who was going to be able to do the job. And I think a few people went to see them, and maybe, you know, things didn't work out. And I got the email a couple of weeks later, you know, thinking, this'll never, you know, they'll have got someone by now. I mean, they're that this is a Hollywood production. They're going to have, you know, pulled out all the stops. But it appears, obviously, that as with anybody for a project like this, it would have to be somebody who would fit with more than just being able to bring an academic ability in the language, you know. But saw this email and went, nah, that ship will have sailed. I thought, I'll phone up anyway. So got in touch with the production, and they said, sure, why don't you come in and have a chat? You know, I'd done so many weird and wacky things over the years to do with Gaelic, you know, that I suppose my CV was pretty broad, even if in the academic department or whatever, it wasn't very deep. So I met Ron and Maro and David Brown, and we had a great chat for about 20 minutes.
Did you read the book for this job, or had you read the book?
No, I read the book over the weekend before I went in to visit them on the Monday. I'd got the book through my hands many times, working in Glasgow City Libraries for 5.5 years. But there was always these horrible covers, these horrible cheap covers on them. And I told Diana, and she went, "Oh my God, those UK covers," you know. And I was like, "No, not half," you know. I looked at it, and this is a scantily clad Scotsman who looks like he's been oiled up to the hilt with half a kilt on. you know, and I'm just going, this looks like a bunch of absolute rubbish. There's no way, you know, it would get thrown in the box for the to get transported back to the central library, and you know, every time Outlander, rubbish, you know. And I think at one point I looked inside it and saw this name, Jamie Fraser, and just thought, this will be some cheesy beggar. I'm not reading any more about this, you know. And I was amazed when I read the book. You know, I was actually amazed when I sat down to actually read it and realising what place had been given to the language, you know, and just like weeping into the book. It's like, I can't believe it, you know. It's actually, you know, the language has been referenced every few pages here. It's constantly in there. All right, sometimes it's misspelled. Fair play, good try. I'll take that. So that was a revelation, frankly. And as it is, I think, to most people who read the book, they go, wow, you know. But for me, it was that revelation on that kind of, in that cultural sense of realizing that you know, you got a friend. If you're teaching actors, it's not just going to be, oh, do you know your stuff about the language? Because I mean, I don't have a degree. I'm an autodidact. I don't have any qualification in Gaelic whatsoever. You know, it's just sheer passion and application, you know, that got me where I am today. As an actor, you've got to concentrate on your job as an actor, and you don't want to be, if possible, getting completely weighed down with the language thing, if there's an easier way to say it without losing meaning. And the key challenge in teaching the language to the cast is to get maximum result for what the writer's vision of what they want to be said, or what was in the book that needs to come through, or whatever, with the minimum hassle for the actors so they can do their job, so they're not laboured by the language. If I had to absolutely pinpoint what my job is all about, then that's pretty much it, actually.
What I did initially was to teach everybody the Gaelic numbers 1 to 10, because contained within the numbers are a great amount of sounds that you don't find at all within English. So you were actually literally having to not only retrain people's ears and their minds, but actually their throats as well. You know, they may well be familiar with the sound ah, but were they familiar with the sound ga? They might be familiar with the sound aw, but were they familiar with the sound och? Right, okay, why don't we pop that up on the board, that line?
Yo a Gaelic show. Yo Gaelic show, follow me and track.
But the most important thing for me is authentic pronunciation. You know, is to sound like this language is their first language. They've been brought up speaking it at their mother's knee.
Smashy Roberts meist en a scoil seo bia lumdún a srach.
But I didn't realise that there were actually some shortcuts you can make with some of the sounds. And, you know, it was because I had never taught actors and never taught for a project of that kind of gravity. So at the start, I just wanted everything to be perfect, because this was the language's big shot. And I was like, everything must be perfect. And I'd be saying to the guys, no, you've got to make this sound. You have to do it. You can't speak Gaelic without it. And I now realise that there are actually sneaky little ways of getting around these sounds, which neither myself nor anybody I've ever met has, you know, I've never heard anybody talk to me about these tricks and sneaks. These are ones that I've made up while I'm on the job, realising where the key challenges actually are in learning the language in a way I never had before, because I never had these kind of stakes. Do you know what I mean? The stakes are so high. You're not just teaching wee Mrs. McDonald's niece who's come along to work out what her auntie is talking about at the weekend. That's not what we're doing. You know, the language is getting the sort of, you know, the highest and you know, most exciting platform. You know, it's had since it was in its own heyday, had its own importance, didn't need anybody to tell it was important or great. But, you know, since the rather unfortunate history of the language, you know, very much disappearing off the face of the earth, then this was really our biggest shot to get it right back into prominence, and therefore shine the light back on Scotland and get us thinking about where it belongs and what the significance of it is. So at the start, it was like, everything's got to be perfect, you know. And I suppose, you know, I probably did put a bit of pressure on the guys, like, you know, realise how culturally significant this is.
It went fantastically well with Sam. The man just has a very live brain. He's an extremely capable guy. He's also extraordinarily professional and dedicated to getting it right.
As je van doel en chikala goer era halak. En nare o kurora.
En nare goer.
En nare goer.
And they loved it. They loved that sense of purpose. They thought that was great, even if they'd never had any connection to Scotland or Gaelic or anything before that. They loved being part of a movement that way. But at the same time, I do look back now and I think, no, that there were ways to actually cheat that a little bit and give those guys an easier time, you know, and we definitely work more that way now. In retrospect, you know, it's like, wow, you know, hindsight, as anyone does in a job, as they evolve, as they gain experience, then you kind of look back and you go, I wish I'd known that, you know, just before I started. But, you know, it's a journey, not a destination, is it not? Keep me great, keep me miracle. Oh, you know, like that. Sina gada. Drún Dorist. Gramakit. Keep me miracle, hey.
Do your guys speak any English at home, or it's all Gaelic?
They don't speak any English to me, but they speak more or less only English to my wife. So they've been bilingual, well, since birth, really. You know, they don't think about it. It's Gaelic with me and English with the mum. And I would say about 75% Gaelic with each other. They don't speak a lot of English together. If they're just with their mum and they're all out together and the conversation's been flowing with their mum in English, then sure, they'll just carry that on in English. But if we're both there, then they tend to err on the side of Gaelic. They've already got the language loyalty, which is really good, you know. And they've got English so they can communicate with the rest of the world, you know, which is always useful.
So you once said that your kids use Gaelic to play and communicate their emotions. Do you feel like Gaelic is better for imagination and emotional communication?
I would say Gaelic is better for that in Scotland as a Scot. You can only get so far as a Scot speaking English before you run up against a brick wall, you know, and I know that Scots who don't speak Gaelic would be like, it's rubbish. And it's like, yeah, it's rubbish because you don't speak it, so you don't know. But now, having learned Gaelic to complete fluency, and not only that, but I can speak 2 distinct dialects of it, I'm kind of like, no, this is a whole new level of Scottish expression that you just can't get with English. So I suppose if they're talking about their country, about their culture, about who they are as people, you know, which they're obviously starting to do, especially my 9-year-old, then they'll do that in Gaelic.
Tell us what your goals are, if you have a crowdfunder or whatever you want to tell anybody who wants to learn and potentially support you.
Well, I mean, I don't have a crowdfund at the moment. I ran a successful one last year. And if you visit Dalriada, so DALRIADA.Scot, you'll see the material that has gradually been added to there. We've only added probably about 100th of what's actually, you know, it will take the next 2 or 3 years to actually complete the website, maybe even the next 5 years. So that's kind of underway. Eventually, what I'd like to do is kind of set up some sort of little tip jar so that I can keep doing field work, because it's a fairly long drive to get to some of these places. You know, it's a heavy toll in the fuel, and then you're just having to pick up some sustenance while you're out, and then you need to pick up batteries for the dictaphone, or you need to there's all sorts of things you need to be able to do, and it can become a strain if you're literally just paying for that out of your own pocket. So eventually I may get round to getting something set up where if people, you know, would in fact, if they would like me to investigate a particular dialect or find out things for them on a particular thing, then I can pursue my own ends and do that at the same time, and people can kind of, you know, donate and get field work done. You know, why not head out to Islay and find out, you know, about the fishing tradition there. Okay, let's do it. You know, it's that sort of thing I quite like to do eventually, where I can almost be on call to an extent and pursue things that really need done before we lose any more of the old folks that are still with us.